Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm going to tell you a story. And to tell you that story, I'm actually going to take us back to Be Freaking Awesome on page 15. I know this fall we're working through Traveling Light, but I had something cool happen this week and I really want to share it with you guys. So on page 15, it starts and says, at age 13, I moved to Arkansas with Sheila, my biological mom, my stepdad, and two half-brothers. This was great for the first few months until we were evicted from that house. My mom started working nights. My stepdad became very unsafe. The next summer, my mom and stepdad were looking for a job again. We spent a couple weeks in Oklahoma City camping in our station wagon. Oh, right. Some people call that being homeless. That was the first time I spent the night in a Salvation Army homeless shelter. It's hard to imagine going from Ohio, where I had lived in the same house for 5 years, never went without food, and certainly always had clothing. Now we were living in a station wagon and looking for a job. I had the option to go back to Ohio, but physical comfort is a small price to pay for a sense of belonging. With my mom and stepdad, I was their daughter. I was accepted and chosen. Identity really is the key to it all. We moved to Northwest Arkansas, and for the first few weeks, we camped in our station wagon. When it rained, we stayed at the Fayetteville Salvation Army. As a 14-year-old girl, this was more unnerving because the women slept on one side of the hall and the men slept on the other side. The teeniest bit of security we had with my brothers and stepdad wasn't there at night. Eventually, we found a house in West Fork, Arkansas, where we didn't have running water for several weeks and often didn't have food, and were evicted from a house a few months later. The scariest day happened near the end of my freshman year of high school, when our car was repossessed on the same day we were evicted. While putting our stuff in storage, the tow driver pulled up to get the car. The older of my two brothers and my mom thought they should jump in the car and try to outrun the tow truck. My stepdad and my younger brother and myself walked about 9 miles back to West Fork, where one of my teachers picked us up, gave us dinner, and helped us get back to Equipment, Arkansas. That teacher, his name is Wendell Beal. And when I wrote Be Freaking Awesome, I looked up his name. I was like, is he still alive? And I found his phone number, and I was too afraid to call him. Most of you have heard the stories that when I published this book, I started having just terrible panic attacks. I'm actually sweating right now thinking about how scary it was. And throughout the years, the last 7 years, now and again, I would have a thought. I wonder about Wendell Beal, and I might Google him. Nope, he's still alive. You got to do that someday. Well, this week, on Tuesday, I was in the shower, and my brain says, call Wendell Beal. And I'm like, and it's the same voice in my brain that the one that said, you got to write a book, which I attribute to God. And I was like, no, thank you, Lord. I'm good. I got stuff to do this week. I don't need to be calling no Wendell Beal. A couple hours later, call Wendell Beal. In case you don't know what I'm saying, his name is Wendell Beal. And I was like, oh my gosh, fine. So I Google, and then I go on Facebook. And here's where the story gets fun. In my opinion, is that I, on Facebook, said, wonder if he has a Facebook profile. And there is my friend Dave Gretzmeyer. And he has posted in 2014, thank you to blah, 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 and Wendell Beal from church for helping us move. Now, you may not know about Dave Gretzmeyer. You don't live in Northwest Arkansas. That last fall, my daughter Lexi went to work for him. He has been my client for 14 years now, since 2009. He loves to say he's one of the original clients from when we worked in the basement. Anyway, and then earlier this year, his daughter, Kat, went to work for us. And so we joke and say we've done the daughter swap. And I'm like, oh, my word. Wendell Beal. Okay, I guess I actually have to call him. So I text my buddy Dave and was like, hey, do you know Wendell Beal? Yeah, see him every week. Go to church with him. Like, can I have his phone number? Oh, he doesn't have a phone. Which is funny because I had a phone number saved in my phone. And he said, you'll have to call his wife, but here's your phone number. And so I call. I said this was Tuesday. This was Monday. I don't know why that matters, but it does. It does because I was training a new employee. So it was really, I seriously did not have time for this. Anyway, left a voicemail. I was just like, hi, this is me. You're my teacher. I'm not crazy stalker person. Call Dave Gretzmeyer. He will tell you. And if you want to ask Google, Google knows all about me. Anyway, so his wife texts me back. Is like, hey, we're traveling today, but we'll be happy to call you tomorrow. And so they did. And yesterday we went to lunch. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly, like, I'm sweating right now. Just talking about how scary it was for me to reach out. And I don't know why. Like, I'm like, even now I'm sitting here going, why is your nervous system so activated? So we talked for a few minutes, and I was just starting a training. And so I was like, can we just, grab lunch? And so yesterday, not nervous, I'm a little bit excited, which, we figured out that those are kind of two sides of the same coin. And as soon as he walks in, he gives me the biggest hug, like the best hug. Like, that just really, really good, like, dad hug that you need. And I just, like, he just held on so tight. I can literally feel like my body just relax. And he goes, man, you give good hugs. And I'm like, so do you. Anyway, I was like, I don't know why it was so scary for me to call you. He goes, I've been trying to figure that out. At first he had joked and said, well, it was good for me to be scary as a teacher. That kind of worked to my benefit. Anyway, we had the most lovely, lovely time. And when I was sitting there and just kind of catching him up on life, and then we kind of went back to that day, and he said, after that incident with your family, over the years, I had wondered how you turned out. And I'm so glad to know how well you turned out. I'm just so proud of you. I was like, whew. It still like kind of takes my breath away a little bit. And when I was sitting there, I was, I was transported back. And y'all know I've done a lot of work in past self. I've done a lot of like going back to those versions of myself. And as I sat there talking to him, I realized that I really hadn't spent a lot of time with myself in that 9th grade year. And when I was sitting with him for just a few of the moments at the beginning, I could feel viscerally what it felt like to be in school that year. Because so here I am, just have spent the summer. I think by the time school started, we still didn't have water. I think we were still going down to the creek and taking a bath. And so imagine 9th grade and like, that's terrifying. And for whatever reason, when he was teaching civics, I loved civics. I'm kind of a nerd. It's no surprise to anybody that I'm in the League of Women Voters now, because I've just always nerded out on this stuff. And so for some reason, he and I would just debate. Like, we would just spar a lot in that class. And so when the first 9 weeks ended, that you had to have your first 9 weeks grades in before they did student council elections, because you had to have at least a B average or a C average or whatever it was. And I got nominated. So here I am, this crazy poor kid and brand new to the school. And I get nominated because I loved government. And even remember the day when I went to cast my vote, and there was, this popular football player that was like, Angela, I voted for you. Everybody says you love government. Okay, cool. This is weird. Okay. That fall, our fundraiser for student council was, we actually had a concession stand that we worked at Hog Heaven. So we got to go to Razorback football games, but in the club seating, which back then it was just on one side, there was just a little bit of club seating. And we had one of those boxes that we actually worked. And so it really exposed me to, that was how I decided to go to the university. I never did a campus tour, never did anything. I just knew that there was an opportunity for life to be better at the university. And so like, I have the memory of like getting elected. I have the memory of just sparring with him. And then that day, the next day. So when he did scoop us up, I don't go into great detail in the book. He, we're sitting there. We've just walked to downtown and we're sitting there, and I'm like, I have no idea where we're going to sleep tonight. And here rolls up this truck, and it's Mr. Beale. And he says, "Hey, Angela, what's going on?" And I go, "I don't know where we're going to sleep tonight." Like, I didn't even have, like, I was so stressed out. I had no way, no guile, none whatsoever. Just was like, this is terrifying. I don't know where my mom and brother are. I don't know if they're safe. I don't know how we're going to get back with them. Like, this was way before cell phones. This was 1988. And so he said, "Well, come on." And he took us home, and he fed us dinner, and he put my brother and I to bed in his guest bedroom. And then he proceeded to, like, ream my stepdad out. Like, "You need to pull your head together and take care of your family." And I don't remember. I say in the book that then we got back to Quitman, Arkansas. The next thing I remember is enrolling in classes at Quitman. So I don't know if my stepdad's parents came up and got us. I don't know if Mr. Beale, I literally have no clue. And you'd have thought I went to lunch with him. I would have asked him about it, but I didn't. Because when I asked him, what was it like? Was it obvious how ridiculously poor I was? And he goes, "You weren't alone." Like, this was the 80s. This was West Fork. Like, everybody was poor. And I was like, yeah. But, like, we didn't have propane. We had to melt snow to wash dishes, like, ridiculously poor. And he goes, "You weren't alone." And I was like, whoa, I had no idea, because you're just so in your own world at that point. And so I don't know where I would be. Like, I know that seems like maybe it's overly dramatic to be that way, but just the little things, like sparring with him, got me on student council, which got me to know that I wanted to go to the university. Nobody in my family was talking about going to the university. Like, that was just not a thing. And so, anyway, I'm super grateful. 35 years later, I feel like I have, like, closed a story loop in my brain and made a new adult friend.
Thank you for story time, Angela. This has been really great, and I often think about the different things that have happened to you and the impact on me and my life. And you going to the university, you deciding to help other people regardless of what's going on. You experiencing homelessness has impacted my life in positive ways, like in ways that, like, the generational poverty cycle, like, we broke it. If you look at my kids, they aren't going to experience the things that you experienced. And I don't know, it just is the reminder to me that small actions really add up, and being kind and noticing others and treating a student, noticing, yeah, you were poor, but so was everybody. There's no reason to treat you any different. Like, that impacted you. Just that decision of the teacher to invest and to, I don't know, invest is a weird word when you think about teachers arguing with students, but I don't know, it kind of is still an investment in a student. And not to say that I think, inviting somebody into your home is a small action. I don't think that is, but you see a need and you have the capacity to fill it. And he didn't doubt. He didn't pause and hesitate and be like, "Well, I don't know, this, that, the other, maybe."
So I glad you said that, because my friend Marcia, who I talk about in Traveling Light, who's read my book more times, Traveling Light, than anybody, maybe even me, she was telling this story to her daughter because her daughter had worked at West Fork. And at that point, she didn't know, because I would just say, "This teacher, my teacher, my civics teacher, whatever." And without knowing his name, she immediately, as soon as she heard the story, she goes, "Oh, that's Wendell Beale, 100%. He will
Mm.
see a need and he will meet it." And I just thought how beautiful that character is to just, it's a beautiful legacy
It really
of
is.
really being, when I gave him a copy of my book and I signed it and I said, "Thank you for being the hands and feet of Jesus," because literally when we say God moves and God helps us, sometimes, most of the time, he uses other people to do that, and we have to be open to listening to that. And it's just a beautiful testament to that. I also am marveling at how many times I could have met him over the years, because my friend Dave, I used to hear about him taking these mission trips to the Czech Republic. It turns out he was going to support Wendell's son when he was a missionary to the Czech Republic. I mean, how cool is that? And also, I just, so close, so close. And yet, for whatever reason, this is the timing that was meant to be. Here's the other thing that I remembered when I was kind of telling him about what I had learned from my childhood. Because we kind of talked about how there's some people that um, they got out and they've worked on themselves and they've healed, and other people use hard circumstances as kind of a reason and an excuse not to do better in life. And I told him about my number one hypothesis of why this is, and I think that why I was able to do it. And I want to say this because there's so many people that are like, "Oh, well, look, you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. You were able to, so why can't everyone?" Number one, the fact that I live with 4 different families, and I saw, like, I literally, you guys, I went from, I was just talking to Barry this morning about, I went to a Catholic school. And so, like, I have new leg warmers, and somebody yesterday said, "Oh my gosh, I have those leg warmers. I remember when we were in the 80s, we used to wear those." And I was like, "Yeah, I was literally wore a Catholic school girl uniform, and the pants of those things were so hideous. The plaid, you would never wear them, ever, ever." And so we always had to wear leg warmers because we were always in skirts. And I was in Ohio and it was cold a lot. And so I lived in leg warmers there for the several years I lived there. So I go from this private Catholic school to rural Arkansas public school. And so, number one, I knew everybody is making up the rules. Like, in my aunt and uncle's house, their rules were related to, you work hard, we have a business, so we can't come to any of the school functions because we have to, solve our business. I made sure that I owned my business so I could be there for my children. My, in my mom and stepdad's life, you didn't have to work. You didn't have to pay rent. It was okay for your kids to go without food. That was the rules in their house. My grandma, I talk about in Traveling Light that she thought the rule of dry counties was optional. And so she was doing her community service and entrepreneurship to help equip people that needed the things that they needed. And so those rules, I knew all the rules were just being made up. So I decided I could just make up the rules. And I think it's harder for people that are like, everybody I know, this is their life. They go to work, they just grind it out. They're in minimum wage jobs. Nobody ever gets an education. They just grind it out. And it's, my mom is like that. My aunt's like that. All my grandmas, everybody, this is what it, and you have that 20 years of living in the same family thinking this is how life is. And I knew it wasn't. I knew you could just decide how life was. So that's one thing that is to my advantage, which in my 20s I thought was the tragedy of my life. I lived in 4 families. I didn't know it was literally the key, one of the keys of my success. And then the other thing is that I was able to develop coping skills that helped me survive. And for some reason, I had the wherewithal to hide my heart deep, deep, deep. I mean, once my adopted mom died, I was like, nope, not going to trust anybody else. And my first therapist said, Angela, every time you got hurt, you just put one more layer of concrete, one more layer of concrete, one more layer of concrete. And so he said, so we're going to excavate. And we had to break apart the concrete. And it wasn't until a few years ago that when Barry and I were doing our marriage therapy that our therapist looked at me and he goes, I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you buried your heart in concrete. And I'm like, excuse me? And he goes, if you wouldn't have, your family couldn't be trusted with your heart, they would have destroyed it. They should have destroyed it. Your heart should not be as whole as it is. You live very wholeheartedly, and you had the right instincts to bury it in concrete and not trust any of them. They weren't trustworthy. And otherwise, there wouldn't have been a heart left to excavate. And I was like, it was the first time somebody affirmed that the coping skill that I had chosen had actually served me and had served me very well. And so that's one of the things that is such a nuance to even what I teach in Traveling Light is like, I tell people, like, you've had these childhood experiences and they served you, you survived, and I'm super proud of you, and you don't need it anymore. It would be very detrimental to my ability to form relationships if my heart were still buried in concrete. And so it is from this passion of going like, man, if I can go from all that, and I know I have an advantage because I lived in multiple families. So sad for you guys that had the same family for 20 years. Just
Womp womp.
That was a little sarcasm, trying to break up the humor here. Anyway, you can do it.
I think one of the things about your practice with coaching in the sort of Traveling Light process, I think one of the pieces that is really hard but kind of revolutionary is expressing gratitude for those coping skills and for whatever it is, the thing that is keeping you safe. Because before you can get to the other side of it, wholly appreciate where you are. I mean, okay, the technical communication nerd in Sammy says that this is just change management. All right. It's just change management in your body. It's change management in an organization, whatever it is. The way that you can create change is to accept what was, what was, be grateful for what was. This happened for a reason at the time that it happened on purpose. And that's okay. That kept you safe. That served your organization, your process, whatever it was. And we can evaluate, how do we want to go forward right now? But when we spend too much time being like, well, that's dumb. Well, that was ridiculous. Like, that's horrible of me. It's really hard to let that go. That part of you wants to feel defensive and then like really dig in and be like, no, but this matters. But I was trying to keep you safe. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that I was here to keep you safe, then I'm not sure that I can actually be let go of. And so that moment to express gratitude for how you have had to operate is really, really important and really hard for a lot of people to accomplish.
Right. Because our coaching method, we talk about, and I think we're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks, but like, when we get people to like, okay, so if I say I'm not enough, where does that show up in your body? And they're like, oh, my stomach. Oh, it's swirling. Oh, it feels terrible. Oh, I'm like, okay, terrible is a thought. Your stomach is swirling. Yeah, tell me about that. And then I'm like, let's see if we can just express some gratitude. I don't start there. We get a little bit into the process, but lots of people, no, I hate this feeling. I don't want my stomach to be swirling. I'm not going to express gratitude for that. And I'm like, I think there's a part of me that's like, well, it is what it is. So you can argue with reality if you want to. But what I like to what I've eased into with my coaching practice is more to say like, okay, well, this swirling, I can tell you as a coach, that is going to give you information. So are you at least glad that your body trusts you enough at this moment to give you some information? Can you be grateful for the information it wants to share? Maybe if you're not grateful for the swirling. I remember last week somebody goes, this is hard, right? Yes, darling. too. I fought this way harder than you did because I didn't have somebody walking me through going, I promise you can do this. You can do this. You can do this. And so, and I would say even I can remember I learned this idea of like being grateful for the coping skills you had from Barry's therapist. Actually, she would come home and he would like unpack what he had talked to her about. Because a lot of times I would be like, oh, you're going to go see your therapist. Do you have some ideas of what you can talk to her about? Because if you don't, I got a list. Super helpful.
So healthy.
So being the Holy Spirit there. Anyway, and so she was like, of course, it makes sense. Of course. Yeah, you needed that to keep you safe. And I would be like, I was like, that's dumb. That's a dumb idea. And then finally it was like, she had to keep on telling him, who kept telling me. And then I finally recognized I think it was a lot more when I got into the nervous system work that I'm like, oh, this is what Olivia was trying to say. This is what she was trying to tell us.
I also had, oh, go ahead.
Well, because if it didn't keep you safe and you weren't still alive, you couldn't be here to fix it now.
Right. I had this experience with my therapist as well in processing through my postpartum anxiety that really flared up after Henry was born. That, I mean, it got to the point like it was really holding me back in life. And after much practice and much time, this is the end result, not the middle or beginning result, could say things to myself like, thank you, anxiety, for trying to keep me safe, for trying to keep Henry safe, for trying to help make sure that we take care of our family. We are going to do this thing anyway. Appreciate your input, appreciate you noting the potential dangers of whatever it is we're about to do. Those are noted, and I will take necessary precautions. And that really became a game changer where I could say, like, thank you, thought, for noting the potential dangers. We're going to do this anyway. That really made things different. I wanted to just go back to something else that you said. When you talked about how you grew up in different families and saw that the rules are made up, not all of us have the ability to just choose that for our life. Something that we can do, though, is you can love on other kids and your kids' friends that maybe from the wrong side of the tracks, maybe their life's not that great. You can give them a glimpse into a life that can be different. And that is a way that you can show up for others, is by letting people in. Let them in. Let them see what life is like. Let them understand that things can be different. Parents can fight without it always being, going to divorce or getting too contentious. That's something that our kids can see as well. There's just an element there's a lot of studies about how kids, their aspirations match what they see. And which is part of why in media, there are different initiatives and efforts to try to show things that you may not see in the real world, or you may not see in your world. And it really matters. One of the things, even like the Cosby Show, as much controversy as there is around Bill Cosby, he made a point that he wore different university sweatshirts in that show because he wanted kids to see school shirts and that there were just tons of options out there. And he wanted you to be able to see at home something that could be possible for you. That was there were a lot of intentional decisions made in that show for his Black wife to be a doctor, not a nurse, not anything else. Like, she was a doctor. She was smart. She worked. All of those things matter in media. That's one of the reasons that happens in media a lot, is that you will try to see, how can I illustrate something? And you in your personal life can sometimes be that example of, I'm going to seek to be healthy. I'm going to take steps to go to therapy, to process my emotions, to not take my emotions out errantly on my children or coworkers or whatever it is. Be that model for other people to look to, is a way that you can serve the world.
Absolutely. I think that I think of Gina Davis, and she has done so much work around this idea: if you can see it, you can be it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of others, but specifically because Gina Davis has come to Northwest Arkansas for the Bentonville Film Festival multiple times. And one of the times that I actually got to go and see her, they took scenes from shows that were popular that had mostly male characters, and they swapped them out with female characters. And it was like, the scene works. You don't have to have a white guy to do this scene. The scene still works if you put a strong female in that role. And it's come so far, and it still needs to keep coming, for sure. But I think you make a great point. I think the other thing is that sometimes people are like, well, but I'm now in my 50s or 60s, Angela, and this is just how I've been my whole life. I'm like, I don't care. If you have been the kind of person that was like scared to make friendships, dig into that, create some emotional safety for yourself, and reach out. I feel like that this, what is your podcast about? Relationships, because we so fanatically believe in belonging and our need for belonging and the need for a community. And so I know that that is something that is a really, really important part of that. And even if people start looking at you weird, like if you've always been the quiet one and you suddenly start talking in meetings, no one is, even if they think weird things, who cares? They're already thinking weird things because you don't talk. So then if you do talk, they're going to think weird things. So who cares? Like, live the life you want to live, and be intentional about the kind of life that you want to live. And it's never too late. It's never too late. My sweet friend Doris, and I tell the story in Traveling Light, it was past her 80th birthday. I'm certain. For sure past her 70th birthday. I need to ask her when this was. Anyway, she got baptized because she'd never done it. And so it's never, never too late. You can always decide, as long as you're here breathing, you can decide to be the person that you want to be and make an impact.
Anything else, Angela, to share with us today? Thank you for opening up.
I'm kind of happy that my nervous system has calmed down and I'm only a little sweaty. It's funny because in the book Traveling Light, I say that I never got stage fright. What I finally figured out is that I was just numb a lot. And I can remember in that first therapist that, helped me excavate my heart. He wasn't my first therapist, but he was my most effective. Anyway, Joe Young, I yelled at him several times and was like, I liked this better when I didn't feel. This sucks, this feeling thing. And I'm becoming more aware of I wouldn't call it stage fright for me, but just that I do get amped up and to speak. And I'm like, oh, dang it. I liked it better when I wasn't aware of this. I was more numb. Because now I'm like, woo, sweating over here and heart's racing. But anyway, thanks for letting me share the story. Thanks for letting me honor a great teacher. For those of you teachers out there, we see you. You are making a difference. It is really important. Please, please, please. If you know a teacher, if you are a teacher, like every time I go to coffee with somebody that says they're a teacher, I just thank you. I mean, literally, you guys, if you think about in Vietnam, we protested our veterans. And now if you meet a veteran, you say, thank you for your service. And I'm not at all trying to compare being a teacher with serving in the military. I get that they're different. And it is its own kind of hard, and it is important work. And so I thank you for your service. Our society would not function if we lost all our teachers. Our society would not function. And so please, 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 a teacher, thank them, love on them. Don't wait till May when it's Teacher Appreciation Month. Thank them now. Thank them often. If you have a teacher that made an impact, he loved it. So reach out. If there's somebody that made an impact, make their day. Find them on Facebook, find them on the Googles, whatever, but reach out. And if you do, send us a message on Instagram or on our website. We would love to hear from you and tell us your story.
Thank you guys so much for listening today. You can also go sign up for our masterclass for just a little bit. We are going to be doing a masterclass, a deep dive in the 7 beliefs, and it has a formal title that you can find on our website, the letter B, freakingawesome.com. And we're so grateful for each and every one of you guys. Thanks so much for being here, and have a freaking awesome day.